It's really extraordinary.
China is so clearly recognized around the world. It is.
China goes beyond just the innovation and more in terms of the green energy and environment.
How can it accelerate its development as an economy that's innovation-based?
My name is Thomas Gold. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. I've taught here since 1981. My areas of specialization are political economy, development, globalization, particularly in East Asia, looking at Greater China. My first visit to China was 1975. I went with a group called the U.S.-China People's Friendship Association. At that time, it was very, very difficult for Americans to go to China. I worked, since 1974, I worked as an interpreter for Chinese delegations coming to the United States. In 1974, the next big delegation that came was Wushu. So I was introduced and I was able to interpret for them. So this is a picture that was taken at the Kennedy Center in Washington with me interpreting for Henry Kissinger. I was asked to interpret for a lot of other groups. Some of them were government officials like mayors or governors. Some of them were performers at Zhongguo Yishu Tuan, sometimes scientists. So that's one reason I was able to know so many people in China. I was in the first group of American government exchange students to study in China in 1979. And I arrived in Shanghai right after the third plenum of the 11th Central Committee, which changed the focus of the party's work to the four modernizations. So I happened to be, the timing was really excellent. In middle of December of 1978, there were two major events. One was the third plenum of the party, which emphasized Duiwai Kaifang, opening to the outside world, and the other was the announcement that the U.S. and China were going to establish full diplomatic relations on January 1st, 1979. So that was a complete surprise. We didn't know that these two things were going to shape our experience. Fudan was my base, but I used that as a base to go and to make friends and contacts and understand life among Chinese outside of the university. I did travel around to as many places as I was able to get to. China at that time, from today's perspective, it's completely unrecognizable.
Since December of 1978, China has pursued a policy of reform and opened it to the outside world, a policy which was initiated by Deng Xiaoping. Major efforts have been made to readjust the economic structure and reform the economic and political systems.
The party and the government have been very willing to experiment. Is a great thing. So I think the policy's been enormously successful. You may have ideas about what China is like, but be prepared to be surprised. China is open to the outside world, both in terms of many people from the outside coming to China to do all kinds of different things, and Chinese going abroad to engage in all kinds of activities. And the other thing is, you may think about China as a socialist country or as a communist country, but whatever you have in your mind about what that means, be prepared to be surprised. That China, socialism with Chinese characteristics, is very hard to put your finger on. You will be very surprised at the amount of personal freedoms that the Chinese have, as well as the dramatically improving standard of living and quality of life. From 2000 until 2016, I was the executive director of the Inter-University Program for Chinese Language Studies. Every year I would go to Beijing several times to make sure the program was working smoothly, about 3 or 4 times a year. The main thing that has struck me, so I mentioned physically the infrastructure, all the high-speed rail and the airports, and so many of the cities look so much more modern, clean, sanitary. It's less mafan to do everything. That's one important change. But the other thing, again, as a sociologist, that is interesting to me is the changing relation between the individual and the collective. My friends at Fudan or my friends in the city, they had very little control over their own lives. But now you have so many more choices that you can make, that I think that's really significant change in China that I think a lot of people abroad, outside of China, don't appreciate. They're not aware of the way that the life for Chinese individuals has changed so much. Diplomatically, China has just scored so many victories. If you wanted to talk about Belt and Road, or you wanted to any of these any of these kinds of things. I'm an American who studies China, so of course I think about that all the time. But more and more our people at all levels, not just at the national level, but at the state level and the local levels, realize that if you want to talk about doing global business or something, or politics, is you have to consult the Chinese. That you can't just tell the Chinese what to do and expect them to follow in line. That the Chinese want a voice at the table and deserve a voice at the table, a place at the table. And more and more Americans are realizing that this is a critical part, that the world has changed and the balance of power in the world has changed. China's wishes, China's position, China's issues need to be taken quite seriously.